Welcome to the Revision Wizards podcast. I'm Miss Catherine M.H, and I am joined by my not-so-dorky co-host, V.E. Griffith.
This is episode 31, and this time we're doing a scene analysis. In a twist, our authors are Miss Catherine M.H and three-story method editor and hospitable alien, Ran Weingartner.
So this time, I get to be a guest on my own podcast. Ran and I have been writing a short story together and finally got it to the point where we're willing to share it. And because you should always get an editor for your work, we've also invited previous guest and three-story method editor Valerie Ihsan to join us and give us her perspective on the story.
One little production note on this one. Valerie had a very tight schedule and we ran a little long, so the recording ends when she had to leave. It feels kind of abrupt, but she was kind enough to join us, so we're happy to accommodate her schedule. And with that, here we go. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have two guests this time. Valerie, if you could introduce yourself or tell us your name and your pronouns.
Hello, I'm Valerie Ihsan, and I go by she or they pronouns.
Okay. And Ran?
I'm Ran Weingartner, and I also go by she, they pronouns.
Excellent. Okay, well, today we're doing a scene analysis, and this time our authors are Miss Catherine and Ran. So we invited Valerie as a second editor because it always seems to work better when we have two opposite opinions. So
you're assuming that my opinion will be opposite of yours?
No, not at all.
Maybe.
But maybe, yeah. When Catherine and I tend to do these, we sometimes come to very different conclusions, and it's a lot of fun. So I really enjoy it. But you can't be an editor on your own scene. So There we go.
So I'm now the guest on my own podcast.
That's got to feel cool.
It does. It's a little weird, but yeah.
All right, Miss Catherine, give us the thumbnail of what this scene is and what are we about to jump into?
All right. So this is a reader magnet for my book that will be coming out soon, Scandal's Pen. And it follows one of the side characters. Her name is Lizzie Milton. And it's really her backstory as to how she becomes a really important person to our main protagonist for the book.
Okay. And just briefly, Ran, how did you guys come to write this together, or what was your process on writing this?
So it's interesting because we wanted to co-write. We knew we wanted to co-write, and so we got that established. But then we were like, well, what should we write? And so I had the opportunity to write really like the backstory to a main character in a world that already exists and a character that already has a future. She's already very well developed. So it posed some challenges in the sense that I felt like I was a guest in this world. But it was also really great because I have read Scandal's Pen, and it's a fantastic story, and it's also a beautiful world that I wanted to write in or write about. So that was our process. We basically, I think, Miss Catherine, you wrote the first draft, and it was very much sort of a skeleton. This is what happens to her, because you already had, I think, her backstory in broad strokes. And then I went in and I started filling in the bits and pieces. And then it was a back and forth after that, because I would come to a spot and I would be like, so actually, is their relationship, or who is this character? And what is that like? And what is this? Describe something to me about this world, about the factory, or about what, it is a historical fiction, albeit a made up history, steampunk. But at the same time, there's a lot of historical accuracies that I had to learn while we were writing it.
Okay. And just for full disclosure, I have also read Scandal's Pen, and of course, Miss Catherine wrote it. So Valerie, you get to be the odd one out who hasn't read it. I believe you have not read it.
I have not read it, but I did do some some coaching. So I know about the story, but I haven't personally read it, and I don't know all the nuances. I just have the skeleton of
Okay.
it.
And
Well-
it's interesting because Ran got an older version than you did, V.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
Well, this should be fun. So usually I make Miss Catherine start with characters on the scene rubric. It's available at revisionwizards.com. But since Miss Catherine can't be her own editor, I'm going to ask Valerie to start and tell us about the characters.
All right. Well, in this, so this is a reader magnet, you said, yes? Is this the reader magnet that comes, is it the cookie or is it the reader magnet? Is it coming after someone has read Scandal's Pen or before?
It's going to come before. There's going to be 3 stories. There's going to be Lizzie's, Theodore's, and Eleanor's.
And those will all be available on the website?
Yeah.
To get, okay. All right. I have other editing comments that don't relate to the scene rubric, if that's the case, then. Okay, so the characters in this short story are, let's see, there's Lizzie. She's the main, she's the main character. And did you want me to go through like the whole rubric on their voice being different, or just say who the characters are?
Go for the whole thing.
Okay. So Lizzie and Theodore are brother and sister. Lizzie, they both speak in a heavy dialect. They seem uneducated, but Lizzie can speak without the dialect when she's in a professional setting. So that makes me believe that she is educated in some way. There is Robert Sr. and Robert Jr. Robert Sr. does not actually make an appearance in this story, but he is talked about. So I can't really say anything about him other than he's just this kind of imposing, like Doom-like character in the background. Robert Jr. is young, but he's very cultured. He thinks that he's in love with Lizzie. Mr. Brown and Lizzie appear at the very beginning of the story. Mr. Brown is the factory caretaker or something. I forget what his actual title is, but he's sort of in charge at the factory. He's very hurried, hard, very self-important, kind of gross. And then the mother also, Lizzie's mother is not in the scene. However, I mean, she kind of is. She's there in flashback. She is currently deceased in real time, but she shows up. At least her language shows up as a memory. And then Mrs. Boyer is the last person, and she is the housekeeper at the big house. She's very stern, also self-important. So I would say those are all of the characters that show up. Oh, and Theodore. I mean, I said Theodore. He's happy. He speaks in dialect, but he's very happy. He's unaware of his danger. He seems kind of like, he just seems cheerful.
He does seem cheerful, and I like him because he's always pretty happy, and he's always pretty, go with the flow kind of guy.
Yeah.
So
I would say that Lizzie is the protagonist, obviously, and the antagonists in this story seem to me Robert Sr. off camera, and also the mother.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular story, I feel like those are the antagonists.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought that our choice of antagonist was, because of the nature of the story, was somewhat I don't even know the word I'm looking for. I don't want to say underdeveloped. That's not the right word.
Ambiguous.
Ambiguous. That's a good, yes. Ambiguous was somewhat ambiguous. We don't have a single big bad guy making life, terrible. There's hints for me that there's somebody in the background who is a danger to Theodore, but we don't know who that is, and we don't know why. Mm-hmm. And that comes from Lizzie's mother wanting that Theodore be protected from whoever this person is that would come after them because of Theodore's father. So I having read the book, I understand what's going on, but for a first-time person, that's going to be a big question mark. And so you could say that outside threat is an antagonistic force as well.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, for Valerie and VE. Is the force of antagonism or the antagonist strong enough in the story?
I would say definitely yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes. I don't think there's a problem with having an ambiguous antagonist at this point in the story.
Okay.
I know that we're at the beginning. The purpose of this exercise is to get the reader interested. This accomplishes that.
Okay, good.
I'm actually really sad that this is a reader magnet and not like episode 1 of Avella, because as soon as it was done, it was like, I wanted to turn the page and know what was next. So knowing that this is just completely done is mildly disappointing.
It makes me really happy because
that makes us very happy.
Me as an overwriter, when I sent her the skeleton, I was like, I already wrote 1,000 words, and our limit was no more than 5,000, which is horrendously hard for me.
Yeah, because you write like 250,000 words.
Yeah. Yes. And we got it under 4,000, and I was like, I can't believe it. So
yeah, you did really good on that. Okay, what is the protagonist wants? What are her external pursuits? And how well was that developed, do you think?
I think it's just to keep her brother safe and unnoticed. I think that's kind of her main job, according to her. So I would say, because I didn't know if this was a beginning of a story or if it was a complete story, I did say that yes, she acquired that because she took the first step in getting a new job. So getting the new job allowed her to monitor him in a different way, in a better way, she thinks.
Yes.
I tend to agree. I rated this excellent.
I did too.
Because her external pursuits are well defined. We know exactly what she wants. She tells us what she wants, and we understand the origin of that impetus. We understand why she wants to protect Theodore through, and actually a pretty good flashback scene. So I think it works well.
Great.
Catherine, what do you think?
It's really cool because that flashback scene wasn't in that was our newest addition, because we were like, we're missing something, and that came in. And I usually hate writing flashbacks, but that one seemed to work well for us. So I'm happy that it's hitting exactly how we want for a short story, because again, this is the first time I've ever written a short story. So I'm happy.
What about her internal desires? What do we think?
I think that's freedom from being her brother's keeper.
Yes.
So I don't think she acquired that.
No, she didn't. And I feel like that's also it too, that she is irritated by having to do this, and also irritated by him because he's not cooperating.
Well, it's because he doesn't know.
Well,
and that was part of the job, was that he didn't know.
Yeah, I understand, but that it can be necessary, but it can still be frustrating at the same time. And that's,
oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's what I thought. I thought, I also rated this as excellent because it's for the purpose of what this writing is, it's right where it needs to be. This one was a bullseye too for me. This is a really good piece of writing.
I marked it good only because I didn't know what this piece was for. And so I was like, well, daydreaming of running away and leaving Theodore could be the internal desire, but it could be something else that I just don't know yet. If this were like just episode 1 of Avella, or if it were chapter 1 of something, it could, the internal desire could come slightly later in a piece that was going to be longer. But now that I know that it is just standalone, then yeah, I would say I would translate it to excellent.
And so there's always, like, we always try to have the wants are sort of very visible, right? They're very visible in the story. The character is going after something that they want. The internal needs can be a little bit more underground. Like sometimes the character doesn't know what it is that they're eating, right?
That's why I marked it good, because it was so clear. Like, I wish that this were happening. Well,
yeah,
because she was so aware of it, I didn't know if it was actually the need or not.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear you say that. It's like, because I wasn't sure. We also added that piece. We added a little piece about the daydreaming piece, because we didn't feel in our first draft, we didn't feel that that her motivation was strong enough. Like the internal conflict with Lizzie wasn't strong enough, and sort of that internal conflict is what drives the character, right, through the entire story, not just this story, but further. So as she goes further and further through her story, that the inability to meet her own need, right? The free, like, she always feels trapped with that need to keep her brother safe and never give in to the fact that she has needs, that she wants a life for herself, right? Is something that's really going to come to a head in her story, in her character arc. So I was glad to hear that came through very clearly.
Yeah. And Ran really helped me out with that, because I've already written Lizzie. Like, this takes place 8 years before the book. Like, Lizzie's written. I know everything that happens to Lizzie. And I was like, what are you like as a teen? Like, this is weird to go back.
Yeah. We had to mine that a little bit, but I think it was there. Like, it was there already. We just had to sort of uncover what it was, right? And it became very clear. And then once that was clear, we just needed to, it was just a matter of going back and saying, like, what was the point at which we're calling it a want, right? But like, at what point was that hammered into her as, like, this is your purpose in life. You are not going to have a life of your own. You exist for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to keep your brother safe. So the trauma of that just kind of perpetuated the rest of the story. So yeah. So I'm glad that came through, and I hope it carries through for the rest.
I think it worked pretty well myself.
Yeah.
I felt like the force of antagonism's external pursuits were not well defined, because we don't have a very clear antagonist like we discussed. In context, that's fine. So if I were to tell you that this is fair, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything better, because of the purpose of the story and what the objective that we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to do is open loops, not close them.
I see.
So
I marked it good, because when I looked at the two different antagonists in my brain, one was Mother, and she wanted Theodore's safety. So I would say that it was easily identified. The external pursuit of the antagonist was easily identified. She was very clear. This is what your purpose is. You have to do this. And then as far as the Robert Sr., I felt like he was the other kind of camera antagonist, and I felt like his was unknown. But as a reader, I guessed that it was to keep the secret of Theo's true identity. That's what I was guessing, but I don't know. And so I felt like he did not get what he wanted then.
Yeah, and I went sort of from a different angle where drawing on my knowledge of the rest of the story, having read the book, that the force of antagonism is not either the mother or Robert Sr. really. There's somebody else out there. I am aware, and I was looking at it from that perspective. That person or that force is not well defined in this story, but like I said, does not need to be. Mm-hmm. So, we know from this story that there's somebody out there who wants Theodore, or who wants to know Theodore's secret, or the secret somehow puts him in danger, or whatever it is. But beyond that, we don't have a good idea of who or what that person, organization, thing, magical power, whatever is.
So it sounds like, for the purpose of this reader magnet, whether a reader has read the Scandal's Pen or not, this part of Lizzie's story is good regardless.
Yes.
Because I don't know. I felt it was defined. VE knows, and he said it didn't matter. So you're good both ways.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's fine.
What about the Imperial Desire?
Yeah, well, before we go to that, because I think that's a really important piece. So the way that I was thinking about it was, this is Lizzie's story, right? So it's sort of it's Lizzie's antagonist, right? She would be the protagonist in this story. She has a need, she has wants, and then there's something blocking her from achieving her at least her needs, if not her wants, in this story. And so for me, the force of antagonism for this chapter is really the mother. And the mother stands in for, you will not have a life of your own. You are barely a person, right? Your entire purpose, including the use of your body, is in service to your brother. And so that tension for me was sort of is the force of antagonism, right?
See, that's fascinating for me to hear. I mean, like, we've talked, we went over this about 5 times before we sent it to you.
Yes, we did.
So, like, we've had 5 meetings, and to me, the antagonist was herself. Like, right, I saw Lizzie as her own antagonist. She is the protagonist and the antagonist, and it's all her head that. So it's cool to see everybody be like, this was the bad guy, and this, and I'm like, I love you all.
Yeah, the tension, like the antagonist, the force of antagonism is really that voice inside her, right? That says, no, you don't get happiness. You have to do this, right? And the stand-in for that is her mother, dying mother.
Yeah, that makes sense. And she doesn't get a choice about something like taking on being the nanny to this little brat. Mm-hmm. She has to do it. She has to make it work because, Mm-hmm. So, and I felt like, again, the force of antagonism, if you look at it from the perspective that Lizzie is both protagonist and antagonist, or her mother is antagonist, I think that this is really well developed. It's excellent. If you look at it from the perspective that I was coming from, where the force of antagonism is outside everybody in the story, it doesn't matter. We know that force is there, but again, the purpose of this story is to open the loop. So it's okay that we don't know who the great Satan in the background is. The wizard is still behind
Satan.
Well, the
demon.
Yeah,
the wizard, very Gwar sounding.
Yes, the wizard is still behind the curtain. So, I think the whole thing works very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is the conflict here?
Did we do the internal desire, actually? I didn't talk about internal desires.
Do you have more? Go ahead.
Well, I think that the internal desires were just to keep secrets for both the antagonist and the protagonist. And in terms of in terms of the mother, if the mother's the antagonist, then yes, in her lifetime, she kept the secret and she's passed that on to Lizzie. And so far, Lizzie has, also kept that secret. So I said that was, I marked that excellent. And that Robert Sr., if he is the off-camera antagonist for this story, then he did not get what he wanted because his desire was to not let, I don't know, I'm guessing, I guess. Mm-hmm. So if I'm guessing, then it would be his desire to not, he doesn't want anyone to know who Theo's father is either, for whatever reason. We don't know yet. That's my guess. And so I don't think that he got his need met because the ball is rolling and Theo is starting to get noticed. So, but I still felt like I still marked it excellent because it seemed very well defined to me.
It's interesting to me that you think that Mr. Leonard knows who Theodore is because he's not supposed to.
So in the story?
Yep. Doesn't know his importance at all.
Well, that leads me into the conflict since BE already asked that. So I wrote the conflict as Theodore's promotion to engineer. Because that definitely caught the protagonist by surprise. Lizzie was like, crap, this is the opposite of not being, of being invisible. Like, no one's supposed to notice you. And when he said that it was because he wanted to keep an eye on him, that to me was kind of sinister and foreboding, like, oh, he must know something then and needs to make sure that nobody else knows. That was kind of, anyway, so I said that the conflict was, I marked it excellent because it caught the protagonist and the reader by surprise. And it also created this unavoidable situation. Now Lizzie has to completely upend her life, get a new job, rebuckle down in keeping him safe.
Yes.
I sort of went a different direction, and I have run into this with Miss Catherine before, where I think of the inciting incident and the conflict as two separate things, and they are not necessarily connected. So he gets the promotion, but the conflict remains her desire to keep him under wraps, and the conflict in this one is internal for me, but his promotion forces that internal conflict to the surface. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like the conflict, the inciting incident makes the conflict happen, but the inciting incident itself is not the conflict.
Mm-hmm. I agree that the inciting incident and the conflict can be two different things. I don't know that the conflict of her not wanting to, what did you say the conflict was? Her desire to what?
To keep Theodore under wraps.
That doesn't keep her by surprise. Like, she's lived her whole life that way. So how is that all of a sudden a conflict that's pushing her out of her comfort zone?
Well, I guess in that she had been successful before, and this was a new complication. I mean, I see where you're going, and it's kind of they're kind of parallel. Yeah, it's semantic, and they're kind of parallel to one another, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think both work for Catherine and my purposes. I think both work. Theodore's promotion is definitely an inciting incident, because now she has to up her game, and then we could absolutely, there's conflict within her, and I'm glad that that piece is clear about needing to keep him safe while at the same time wanting a life of her own. And that always comes, back to the surface whenever she has to level up her game. Then it comes up again for her. So that works as well. But also because she has to level up her game, there's that's also a conflict, right?
Yes.
I mean, I just saw it as Theodore got a promotion and she's like, shit. But that was me.
Yeah. And that's the very definition of an inciting incident. Whenever a character goes, oh shit, then that's it. That's the inciting incident. You've nailed it.
Yeah. And this is also a slight scene from Theodore's story as well, because Theodore's story is the other end of how he got the promotion. And so she's her story starting where his story is ending. So it's kind of was fun for me.
Cool.
I felt like are we ready to move on to choice?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt like the choice here was, does Lizzie continue with whatever it is that she's got to do to protect Theodore, or does she finally give up and say he's not cooperating and just walk away? He's an adult now and let him do his thing. And I felt like that choice was clear and thrust upon her, which was really good. It was she would have been happy enough in the status quo, and the conflict forces her into a choice that she has to make. And because of the choice that she makes, the next steps of the story reasonably follow from that. So that I felt like that worked very, very well. It was very clear to me.
I marked it fair. And let me tell you why. So I agree with you. The choice is the same: to stay and take the lady's maid position to get the best intel on Theodore, instead of running away by herself to the new town and a new life where she could stop running and stop worrying about Theo. So those were the two choices: stay or go.
Yeah.
So I felt like her choice to stay and take care of her brother, well, it would first of all be the irreconcilable good. That's the type of choice, like taking one for the team. It's not going to be good for her, but it'll be good for him. So I marked it fair because the choice between staying and going is one that would normally be fraught with indecision and tension. But because I don't know Lizzie yet, and this is just, 3,000 words in, the decision does seem too easy for her. Of course, she's going to stay and take care of her brother. So it seemed kind of like, if the choice is obey my mother's dying wishes and take care of my family, or run away and do my own thing, it just seemed like a no-brainer. Of course, she's going to pick her brother. So I felt like the choice was too easy for her. The stakes, the consequences, she didn't spend enough time really weighing it. It was just a tiny little blip, but that's because of the nature of the shortness of the piece. So we don't have enough time for her to really, we're not in her mind and soul long enough to create that tension of, should I go or should I stay? It was just a couple of paragraphs, so but that's because it's, less than 4,000 words long. So we don't have time to invest in her needs and wants and choices in the short number of words allowed in this piece. So I did mark it fair because of the rubric rules, but that's why.
I'll accept it. No.
I wish there was a little bit more time, like maybe one other moment where she was trying to like, should I do this or should I not? Maybe leaving the bedroom scene with Robert Jr., who offered her the job, and have her, come to that decision once again, and then going back to Robert and saying, okay, I'll take the job.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree with you, Valerie. I think that could be beefed up. On the one hand, like that's the part about this choice. Like I think VE, you're right as well. I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that, because we were sort of like, well, there's no choice, and that's, for her. She will always pick Theodore over herself. And so because we've established that pattern, any choice that, like, what we want, I think, Catherine, we also had that conversation, like what we want for the reader experience is whenever Lizzie comes to one of these crossroads, we want the reader to go, choose freedom, Lizzie, choose freedom, right? Like that's what we want. And then she is almost there and is about to do it, but no, she goes back to her brother, and we're all disappointed for her. And because that's like, if that's what we want as a reader experience, then we haven't spent enough time really delving into her longing for that to happen. Really, you know what I mean? We haven't done enough work to make the idea of her choosing herself and choosing her freedom palpable enough for the reader.
Because of the short, you don't have enough time to like create another whole scene really where she's interacting with someone. But maybe just having maybe she's got like an old postcard of another place that she keeps as a prized possession, like some place that's not here. And you can have her like looking at it or touching it or pulling it out before she goes to bed at night and putting it under her pillow. Something that shows like she's really yearning to be somewhere else. Yeah. So that when she does make the choice.
Yes. I think those are great ideas. Absolutely great ideas. And I think we should probably consider something of that.
You're making this longer on me. I'm trying to stay short, guys.
That's only a paragraph,
left. Come on now.
That doesn't take very long.
Yeah, you're talking way less than 1,000 words. I mean, 5,000 words would be fine for this.
Nah, man, I could go another 10.
Okay.
I think
reader magnets really could be novellas too.
True.
So the consequence,
the problem with it being a novella is that a novella to Miss Catherine is 100,000 words.
Yes.
Oh,
right?
No.
That's already too long for me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Valerie.
Oh, I was just thinking, the consequence, I think, is often the most easiest thing to write as a writer, because it's always just what happens next. It's the natural movement. It's the kinesiology of the words. Like it just happens that way. So the consequence of her choosing to stick around and take the job is that she starts working as the lady's maid and gets the young miss, who's Eleanor, to like her enough to comply, at least. I mean, you see them on the same page by the end of the story. At least we think we do. I mean, for the purposes of the story, they're on the same page. So I marked it good, but minus, because there wasn't that huge struggle for Lizzie to accept the job. So the consequence was expected.
Right.
But it was interesting to see how Lizzie piqued Eleanor's curiosity. And so I was hooked into knowing how Lizzie and Eleanor, I wanted to know how Lizzie is going to use Eleanor for Lizzie's gain, out of necessity, of course, Lizzie's not a bad person. But I also wanted to see how their friendship grows and evolves. And I only know that because I know that Eleanor and Lizzie's later relationship becomes deeper because of my work that I've done with you, Miss Catherine. I haven't read the book, but I know that there is some other kind of relationship that develops over time. So I'm curious about how that comes about. And now that I know you are not writing anything else about that, I'm not happy.
I mean, you're going to get
good
a story from Eleanor a little later on, so you'll see some of it. But I'll fill you in more when we're not recording, so I don't give anybody spoilers.
I felt like the consequence was sort of fair plus, basically for the same reasons. Obviously, she's going to take the job. I felt like that opening the loop on what the job entails is good, was good. But I felt like, of course, she's going to take the job, or you're not going to have a story.
Yeah.
So, unless the story is going to wind up being that she says screw this and runs away, and then then you have sort of an alternate universe problem. So
yes, exactly.
So I mean that's where I went with it. I felt like I think fair plus was where I landed on that. Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I needed her literally to have the job, because that's where the book starts. Like, she is the maid. Like, the book starts because of her. My favorite thing that I had said to Ran was my last line, which was scandals, because I was like, yo, I've got to tie it in. And part of their relationship throughout these, so the book starts 8 years later. Throughout these 8 years, it is all Eleanor and her do. They collect gossip from everyone. They collect scandals. They play it around to people. It's like her fun game of seeing the outside world. And Eleanor doesn't quite understand that it was literally, you are collecting info, so I know if my brother is safe or not. But for her, she was like, this is so much fun. And so it really helps later on in the book to know that she got it from Lizzie, and that she's left because Lizzie's, missing. So yeah, I don't know. I needed her to be a maid because it has to happen.
I don't have the piece pulled up in front of me, but two things that I felt uncomfortable with as I was reading it was the dialect. It could be construed as stereotypical or microaggression or something like that. It sounded anyway, but I got used to it a little bit as I was reading, but I did start out I don't know if maybe you want to, what do they call that? Not a sympathy reader, but a
sensitivity reader.
Sensitivity reader. Yeah. Just somebody else's opinion about that. And you can also, dialect is of course really hard to read as a reader. So you could just use a word or two that would indicate, that dialect, and then write the rest in non-dialect so that it's easier to read. But I was mostly worried about the sensitivity part for that. As far as starting the story, do you want me to just spoiler?
Go for it. Yeah. No,
okay.
That's okay.
Starting with, when I first started reading, I thought we were starting it with a rape scene. I did not know that she was, it's definitely sexual abuse in the workplace, but I didn't know that she was allowing it to happen for a purpose. So that was a little bit off-putting and kind of I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this as I'm starting the story, which is not where you want your reader to be. So I would recommend, as an editor, I would recommend having that particular scene be off camera. So maybe you can start the scene where she's like buttoning up her bodice or straightening her skirts, and Mr. Brown is saying whatever he's saying. And so you can still have her thinking her mother's stuff, the flashback, as she's like walking down to her station again, or something like that. So you can indicate that has just happened. It doesn't feel like a rape scene then. And also, it just, also the very first flashback where she's hearing her mom's words, "Don't tell anyone about him," I thought was referring to Mr. Brown. So I got really confused about what I was supposed to be feeling or experiencing at the very beginning.
Okay.
So
that's good to know. Yeah. I do
having
know,
having the remembering a different time from the action of intercourse.
Yeah. Well, so like I debated on whether or not to show that in like this story, because it is, Scandal's Pen is dark steampunk. And I don't want to give people that, oh, it's like a fun historical when like you read the book. It's about finding a sex slave trade. It's about like the Me Too movement and how women have had to just put up with it for reasons. And
so then I would make her, disgustedly like wiping herself, feeling yucky, getting out of the room as fast as she can, and having that internal dialogue of, I have to do this for my safety. I have to do this for my brother's safety. It's disgusting. You can show that in internal dialogue and not in action. That would be my recommendation for the beginning.
The other question that came to mind for me, how old is she in this?
She's 17.
She needs to be 18.
It doesn't work with the time frame.
Why does she have to be 18, VE? Statutory rape laws probably didn't exist
for them.
in that world.
I understand, but some publishers can get hinky about under 18 sex.
Oh, well, it happens. That's part of the reason that I
self-publishing,
forward.
And you're the publisher.
But also the fact that girls this age are in this. This is happening to them.
No, I understand the reasons.
Part of my push forward.
I agree with it. I just wanted to flag that as as you don't want to get your account suspended in terms of service violation. And
I mean, I'm also not showing it as young adult either. It's new adult for my genre. Also,
this particular story is not going to be for sale.
That's true.
No. It's going to be on your website.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's not explicit. It's not.
I mean, thrust is kind of explicit.
No, that was like her age is not explicit.
Line.
Her age is not explicit. Yes. No, you're right.
Okay.
The sex is explicit-ish, but the her age is ambiguous in this story.
It says
we do mention it.
Yeah. As a 17-year-old, there's a line that says, as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, a little later after the sex.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it was in there. That's what flagged it for me. You may want to.
You could just take that out, and it would be
as a young woman.
Yeah,
and make it age indeterminate, and then it would still work, and you'd get around the terms of service issues. So,
I'll think about it. Because it is, like I said, this happens to women.
But I think there's ways of doing it. They could be inexplicit in this scene, and I mean her age, and then at the same time be like, she's been doing this a long time, right? Like she's an old hat at it. Like there's ways to still get the point across without it appearing that we're what's the word?
Sexualizing children.
Thank you. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
All right. So I guess thanks, because I know Val needs to leave.
Yeah. Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It was really fun. What's that?
Any parting thoughts?
I just am happy that I got to do this with you guys. It was really fun. And if you ever need an extra set of eyeballs, I'm happy to come and do this again.
You're always welcome on the show. All right. Well, thanks, y'all, and we will see you next time.
Okay. Bye for now.
Stay magical. Of course, now I have something in my eyeball the moment we hit record. Okay. Welcome to the Revision Wizards podcast. I'm Miss Catherine M.H. You know what I didn't check? Because I just realized I didn't even check if I'm using the correct microphone. Okay, I am. Wait. Okay. No, we're gonna click that. Oh, that was loud. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That was a good catch on my part. It wasn't hooked up to it, even though it's plugged in. Normally I check that. Oh, okay. Let's do this. I would say like, hey, we're not even keeping the video anymore, but you could add this on to something if you need it. Anyway.